moment when I was thinking about moral enhancement, I tempered my opinions a little bit more in the meantime. What I'm going to talk about is just a few of the issues I see in relation to the moral enhancement debates. I've been mostly engaged with the enhancement debate years ago around neuroenhancement and issues of authenticity. So I found it fascinating to see the moral enhancement debate develop, and then see it kind of go into the area of thinking about SSRIs and oxytocin and all these things. Something changed in from anyway. Yeah, so it has been argued that moral enhancement is not just desirable but urgently required, as we all are aware of this, and it's about the ubiquity of human failings and the potentially catastrophic consequences that lead then to the claim, at least by some, that given the apparent failure of traditional interventions to make us morally better, we should look into enhancement by biotechnological means. And so a lot of that debate is focused on drawing on moral psychology and neuroscience, and so a lot of research in that field has been used or drawn upon in the debate to show how our moral psychology is fundamentally flawed in relation to moral standards and individual improvement. So there's lots of implicit biases, we have prone to depression, we have availability bias, and all kinds of cognitive biases and effective strange effects. And when you look at the scientific discussion, there have been general moral characteristics and capacities proposed which can be improved and then which could be considered morally desirable, even in pluralistic societies. So the idea of focusing on something that we agree on, we agree to the same different opinions on content of morality. There's a lot of use of science in these discussions, though. There's a lot of use of evidence of fundamentally or clinically achieved impact of such characteristics by biomedical and biotechnological means. And that evidence has been used to call the plausibility of certain interventions as moral enhancements. It's taken place in the wider context of moral psychology and neuroscience and morality, as opposed to particular on say, non-cognitive aspects of moral thinking, or the effective role, or the impact of effective dimensions on our moral capacities. Now we have these two specific moral enhancement candidates that are quite prominent in the literature. So most prominently, oxytocin on one hand, SSRIs on the other hand. So it's not necessary for conceptual theoretical points about the legitimacy of moral enhancement principle, but if you look at the literature, they're extremely prominent in the discussion. Their role is, well, I'm not entirely sure what their role is, but they definitely do add plausibility for moral enhancement as a realistic and pressing bioethical issue. So they provide something like proof in principle that there is such a thing that could be moral enhancement, even if maybe it doesn't work that way in reality, but there is enough evidence to point to that there's something to the idea. And it could even be used in relation to identifying potential significance of current practices, for example, of using SSRIs, the widespread use of SSRIs, as something that would need to be considered under the perspective of this having more impact than what being currently potentially pressing bioethical issue, or at least an issue worthy of attention. There's plenty of evidence that there's a certain plausibility to these two as moral enhancers. We went through that yesterday, so I probably don't need to say much about that. And what I want to point out now is that there's a number of problems in relation to using these examples in discussion on moral enhancement. So first of all, there's the issue of transition from experiments to real life. So what would it take for these to be used for moral enhancement? And there's an issue around the artificiality of experimental situations. So a lot of these experiments are about people who have taken this once, so have taken certain things, have had the nasal administration of oxytocin, or taken one doses of SSRI. And so it's unclear which of those effects in an artificially controlled situation is relevant for real world decision making. With the issue of the scale of effects, so it's very unclear how far and in what direction those minor effects that have detectable experimentally could actually impact on complex moral actions in real world context, and the issue of once-off administration versus continuous use. So there's a bit of evidence that long-term use rather than the experimental once-off administration can lead to quite significant changes in effects. Which brings us to the next point, so the complexity of the morally relevant effects. So both in relation to oxytocin and maybe more in relation to SSRIs, there is some evidence that the long-term effects might be actually quite different from what the short-term effects are. So for the SSRIs, at least for the group of younger people, there's plenty of evidence in relation to aggression related to SSRIs. There's also queries around oxytocin in terms of longer uses, how much that actually has been verified so far is still open to debate. One thing that's also an issue in relation to this is, and I was struck by just the presence of the quantity of experimental use of experimental literature in some of these discussions. I think they have the danger of leading to some kind of illusion of precision. And if you think about something like the use of psychotropic medications, which are meant to be quite targeted in relation to certain types of psychiatric conditions, we look at the history of psychiatric drug development. They're quite blunt instruments. They do an awful lot of things at the same time. They're hardly ever as precise as this might look like. So it's likely that these enhancers are similar kind. We have complexity, as Eric Harris was saying on the first stage, like nature as a web, this complex interconnected sets of effects with different time scales, physiological impact, experiential effects, so issues like self-regulation, relationship impacts, wider social impacts, and the question of the effect of external factors, so the relevance of the individual in wider societal context and the interaction of the social context with individual ramifications. So we can modify the individual, but what happens in the wider social context. And I think engaging with this requires more than just a nod towards the notion of context specificity. And linked to this is, I think, the danger of exploiting the rhetoric of science to a certain extent in this literature. So, not disputing the value of interdisciplinary work, but in a way, sometimes it seems to be a little bit borrowed legitimacy. So, legitimacy of claims bolstered by apparent scientific underpinnings. So, presenting moral enhancement work as integrated with that scientific discourse could convey scientific grounding for claims that are not necessarily then borne out by a discussion. And there's also the problem of conveying degree of empirical differentiation, precision, and certainty. We talk about neurotransmitters, what happens in the amygdala, about steroid levels, and it doesn't really correspond to the degree of scientific certainty with regard to linking those phenomena to the issue of moral enhancement. And it also doesn't necessarily do justice to the degree of differentiation of the phenomenon of moral enhancement itself. And there is a danger, I think, in general, that this could potentially distract from philosophical work that still needs to be done regarding what moral enhancement would consist in. So, presenting something as very scientific can give the illusion that kind of the hard questions have already been answered. Which brings us to the next issue, namely the question of neglecting the underlying understanding of morality. So again, I'm not denying that there's quite a bit of philosophical differentiation in the contributions, but often what should be approved in moral enhancement seems to be taken for granted as uncontroversial. I mean, we've had a few comments like this at this conference as well. So usually it's rejection of antisocial harm-causing behavior, increase in pro-social perception of effective behavior, and increase in the scope of moral concern. Slightly more differentiated is somewhere in the literature, think last year, for example. But this indication of significance of understanding morality in the debate around the role of freedom and moral deliberation is kind of be brought in. I think it indicates that there's more to be looked at. But again, it's sometimes hidden by looking at this issue as an issue-specific issue. So it's about freedom. It is about moral thinking, about cognitive approaches, rather than thinking about this is actually about the nature of morality. We need to think that bit further. Freedom only makes sense as an issue if we have an understanding of morality where that plays a role. So I would say it would require more careful reflection on what would constitute moral enhancement beyond assumptions of utilitarianism as the only framework with anything constructive to say about enhancement, about individualism, about morality, so it's about individuals who need to be enhanced, or lists of items that might be a nice improvement. I think we need a slightly more comprehensive and complex understanding of what should be enhanced in moral enhancement. And so we need to reflect on how moral enhancements could be conceptualized from other moral theory frameworks, or even across different moral theory frameworks. So I found the discussion of moral conformity enhancement influence, for example, one potential candidate that could be something that different approaches to morality could agree on. Then the final point that I found striking is in terms again of things that seem to be neglected is the neglect of the active moral enhancements. So while active and passive enhancement are quite frequently opposed to each other, there's actually not that much attention paid to them in more detail. So they're mostly mentioned to contrast with passive moral enhancement, then the discussion kind of moves on from there. And so one thing I would find fascinating, coming from a clinical psychology background myself, is the question of what about these active enhancements? So are active moral enhancement intervention like psychotherapy, would they be of interest for the debate for achieving certain kinds of comparisons? They're interesting particularly because they would be the kind of interventions that we do when people are adult and run into problems and need to kind of be improved in a certain way. And so when you look at the literature around enhancement, psychotherapy doesn't really play much of a role except being mentioned every now and then, quite regularly actually, but not really going into it. If you look at the literature around psychotherapy, they tend to stay really free from engagement with moral values, because that is one of the underlying assumptions in a lot of the psychotherapy field, that what is being done has nothing to do with values, or it has to do with enabling people to find their own values. And outside of, let's say, professional ethical duties or therapy for antisocial disorders, you don't have that much discussion on the moral component of psychotherapy interventions, with some interesting exceptions. But I think there would be something to be gained from looking at this, for example, in relation to thinking about constructive as well as potentially destructive impact of adult moral changes, and especially also in relation to the issue of context-related challenges or limitations for real-life impacts of moral enhancements. So that was the long list of issues that I think should be looked at, and I have no answers for you, except that I think it's worthwhile spending a bit more time on those issues. So thank you very much.
The second speaker now, I'm going to mispronounce your name, apologies in advance. Peter Lichacz. Can virtue ethics enhance our understanding of the moral aspects of human enhancement?
Yes, it can. Thank you. Virtue ethics is currently considered as the third main way of understanding ethics in contemporary academia, apart from deontological and consequential approaches. Usually it is set against the two others as an approach that is more pluralistic, relational, and holistic, that is to say, towards compartmentalization. Second, it is deliberately unverifiable because of the nature of moral domain, that is to say, avoids mathematization of ethics. And third, it fits well with what we now know about moral psychology. These three elements of usual schematic and simplistic representation of virtue ethics may sound attractive for those who are dissatisfied with consequentialist and theological theories and seek an appropriate framework to think about moral aspects of humanity. Today, there are attempts to read virtue ethics of various historical authors who wrote about morals, to the extent that the term virtue ethics suffers an inflation signification. Since this inflation is problematic interpretation, I intend to be more precise and take Thomas Aquinas as a clear representative of virtue ethics and one of my main sources of inspiration here while thinking what virtue ethics might contribute to the topic of enhancement. Taking inspiration from the works of an author who lived about 7 centuries ago is troublesome. But overcoming these obstacles is worthwhile. Why Aquinas? First of all, because his virtue ethics is particularly developed. Second, Aquinas deeply believed in the unity of science with morals. He would call it wisdom. Because of this and because of his high respect for nature, these moral policies were primarily open to what we may learn from natural sciences. One could say that his ethics is naturalist in the Aristotelian sense. Third, it is also maximalist, as it is set for enhancement, development, and perfection. Apart from that, I deem it is an asset that Aquinas is a pre-Cartesian author. In today's thinking about the world, human body, mind, and morals, we are pervaded with modern ways of thinking. This is a real treasure, of course, and this treasure is great. However, we often do not see how much is suitable on these particular planets. Focus on this treasure can also hinder noticing some signs, perceiving significance, or appreciating some aspects of reality that were more accessible to ancient and medieval authors. Reading pre-modern texts might broaden the frame's modern rationality. Aquinas did not ask today's question, but we can take some clues from his usual way of thinking or use some analogies. From such textual and doctrinal research, we can conjecture that, had he been confronted with the problem of moral evaluation of enhancement technologies, Aquinas would probably emphasize at the beginning that striving for perfection is in itself natural, reasonable, and good. He would probably underline as well that science and technology are good in themselves because they come from rational human nature and are essentially epistemic virtues. That is to say, some steady dispositions perfecting human being. Obviously, they might be perverted, abused, as almost everything on earth. But in itself and in general, they are good and call for great things. Aquinas is widely known as a natural law thinker. Yet, contrary to what might be expected from him, I guess he would not use the notion of nature to oppose the enhancement technologies, just as he would not oppose to logic. Among some conservatives, you can hear this argument that enhancement technologies are morally suspect because they are artificial, not natural. Well, is logic natural or artificial? Aquinas would say it is artificial. He considers logic as an art of thinking. Art that enhances our thinking. However, Aquinas might use the notion of nature to expose an exaggeration in some radical attitudes towards these technologies. But he had more time to state his position on the new enhancement technologies. Aquinas would presumably say something about the role of the purpose of human life and an appropriate recognition of human identity, about the role of analogical thinking, about various notions of nature, various notions of perfection, its relativity and its gradation. He would also have something to say about phases of human development and about several aspects of human psychology, especially those responsible for diverse mechanisms of self-deception or deceiving others. Had he had only little time, apart from defining fundamental notions, he would probably mention what virtues and vices might incline us to promote these technologies or to use them in one's personal life, as well as what virtues and vices could incline us to oppose to the development or use of these technologies. Aquinas was accustomed to define contentious issues generally enough to reach an agreement with his discussants. This is why I think he would start with a broader notion of enhancement than this elaborated in distinction from treatment, to include any means of enhancing human form or function. In this way, enhancing seems to be a synonym of perfecting. We can easily agree today that such enhancement is something good, and even that we are naturally set for the activity in perfecting ourselves, and for various forms of enhancement. One could say that defining enhancement in such general way is trivial and useless, because such general notion is not problematic or controversial. Problematical or controversial are new enhancement technologies. They trigger moral doubts and hesitations. I suggest that this is exactly the reason why defining enhancement generally is helpful. It helps to see more clearly that it is not enhancement itself which is problematic, but either our lack of knowledge concerning the new technologies or the current state of these technologies. We do not know whether what we call new enhancement technologies really brings about enhancement, all things considered, and it's not harm or disfigurement. In the short term, perhaps some of them do enhance something, but we know too little to be confident about their results in the long term. We have doubts and hesitations because we feel that we do not take into consideration something important, or that at present we see too narrowly. I think these doubts and hesitations are especially true about genetic forms of enhancing our children. Virtue ethics seems appropriate in this context, since it characteristically favors the long-term, even lifelong considerations, and takes as morally relevant much more elements than other ethical theories. Trying to understand something in moral terms within the framework of virtue ethics, one often tries to distinguish between what is good from what is too little and from what is too much to be good. On the one hand, it seems obvious that it is possible to deviate from the way of perfection through vices that cause a lack or deficit of enhancement. For example, ignorance, desperation, absent-mindedness, negligence, sloth, cowardice, conceit, vanity, and many, many others. On the other hand, can we exaggerate with enhancement? I guess Aquinas would say that we could not exaggerate with a true enhancement. If we take enhancement to be a synonym of perfection, or a degree of perfection. However, despite our good intentions to enhance, we can easily engage in a caricature of enhancement. make a disfigurement rather than enhancement, and thus harm, weaken, impair, debilitate, alienate rather than enhance. Take an example of somebody who tries to surgically enhance the shape of his lips or nose, but with his teeth operation we see that he really exaggerates, since his appearance becomes monstrous. There appears a lack of balance, lack of harmony, lack of order. Well, we can say that some people walk quite naturally, but here we are talking about morals, i.e. human decisions. To a certain degree, something analogous can be seen with mood or cognitive enhancement. In this sense, yes, we can exaggerate with enhancement. Aquinas' analysis of various vices offers a host of candidates that might lie behind such or other exaggerations in attempts to enhance. This might similarly be ignorance, imprudence, levity, helplessness, negligence, sloth, cowardice, boastfulness, vainglory, dissimulation, greed, stupidity, immoderation, and many others. Who contemplates the new possibilities of enhancement given to us by contemporary science and technology and cares for moral integrity has to ask oneself or assume what is there to be enhanced and how to distinguish enhancement from disfigurement or caricature. Without this fundamental consideration, the use of new enhancement technologies is morally questionable for virtue ethicists because it seems impossible to have the same judgment of prudence or true moderation or courage to be oneself or truthfulness to oneself and to others. Truthfulness to oneself and to others Aquinas considers as a part of justice. Of course, prudence might also incline us to learn about the new enhancement marvels and use some of them courageously, although in moderation, and thus to fight for justice or act justly. Some forms of enhancement might be a good start to develop true virtue, or a good stop to ends and vices. It might help to embrace serious moral values and to put into practice the desire for true perfection. Virtue ethics is often reproached with not being helpful in deciding what is right or wrong in particular cases. Indeed, when you come to a virtue ethicist with your moral opponent, as an answer you hear this infamous phrase, act as a virtuous person would act given the situation, often such an answer is not helpful at all. But this frustratingly general phrase may be rendered meaningful when it is elaborated in detail. Aquinas did it in his times, and it seems that some of his insights might be still inspiring nowadays too. His elaboration of from the order of virtues and vices might be helpful to build, develop, or stretch our moral imagination when we consider moral aspects of new enhancement technologies. Such considerations within the framework of virtue ethics are applicable to many groups of agents involved in the new enhancement technologies. Researchers who develop such technologies, companies or governments who treat it as their investment, governments regulating advertisers, physicians prescribing users, patients, or clients with their families and friends, and finally, ethicists, bioethicists, and neuroethicists who analyze it and pass their moral judgment on it. An analysis of the contribution of each of these groups to enhancement technologies would presumably enable us to know how to evaluate morally these technologies, not as they could function ideally, but as they really function here and now, in this world, where we are able to perform almost everything. It is also possible to do moral evaluation of the enhancement technologies as they could function ideally, and it could be justified in certain contexts. But at least some effort should be done to distinguish it from advertising. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Johanna, Ahola-Launonen.
Yeah, Ahola-Launonen.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. And my topic doesn't have anything to do with moral enhancement. The program says so, but it's not my fault. It's the organizers who have tried to get me to speak about moral enhancement. Program version after program version. What my focus of interest is that, or I'm interested about the nature of the for and against discussion on enhancements, and why it seems that the burden of proof is almost always with the ones who don't want to advocate for the enhancements. And it seems that yesterday we heard about this first wave discussion of enhancements and how the other ones say that the other ones are evil and the other ones are stupid. But I think that it's more easy to be stupid in the discussion than evil. And especially, I think that while reading the literature on enhancements, everyone, or almost everyone who try to argue against enhancements are easily labeled as conservative. And kind of having the burden of proof, and why won't you support or advocate for enhancements? And I try to think that why is it so? And why is the burden of proof in those who do not advocate? And what my kind of remark is that the whole project of enhancement kind of takes place in the ethical framework of medical ethics. And that's something interesting, because medical ethics is a very neutral framework. And if not neutral, it has a very strong positive connotation, because who would be against medicine? Medicine is always good, and well, says the framework. And it's very hard to, or why would someone oppose some medical solution that cures a disease or decreases suffering or whatever? So medical ethics, if you can get into the framework of ethical framework of medical ethics, you have kind of won the debate already, because you have the establishment of neutrality and positive connotations of the ethical framework of medical ethics behind you. And then again, I think there's something wrong or something problematic in it, because whether or not we advocate for enhancements, as we've heard this advocation of enhancement in this conference, I think it's fair enough to say that there's something to think about in enhancements, and there's some problems that might end up being big problems, or they might end up not being big problems, but at least there's a lot to discuss. And so think that is it justified that the whole project of enhancement is situated in the ethical framework of medical ethics? And then I'm trying to do this kind of disciplinary transfer from medicine to enhancement. I'm not an expert in disciplinary transfer. I try to consult my colleagues in the area of philosophy of science and kind of detect what makes a discipline a discipline. So what kind of features make a discipline the discipline that they are? And of course it's not an easy question to answer that what is medicine and so on, but at least I'm trying to do that, kind of search for the target and interest and justification and objects and so on from medicine, and then kind of compare it if there was a discipline of enhancement and what were the kind of analogical things in enhancement, and then see if the two really do share the relevant disciplinary characteristics that would enable the enhancement discipline to be situated in the medical ethics framework. And well, starting with some similarities, for sure the language is medical in both, and as being my premise here, the ethical framework is the medical ethics one or clinical ethics one, with the neutral or positive connotation, having most focus on the individual and the four principles of bioethics. And whenever I'm of course talking about the paradigmatic or mainstream literature on discussion on enhancement, of course there are plenty other, but maybe more in the marginals, I'd say. Then practice in both is the use of biomedical means. Of course, in medicine we also include, psychotherapy and so on. But nevertheless, it's kind of, use of biomedical means would be the most practice. And then the justification, I'd say in both would be to improve human life. What's the justification of medicine? Decrease suffering, improve human life, whatever. And the same would be the case with enhancement. But then going to these similarities, I kind of make the first categories of aim and target. They are, I think obviously there's a dissimilarity, but I'm not sure whether the first ones are significant. Like medicine starts from the normal and has no end point, and then enhancement starts from the normal and has no end point, and medicine starts from below normal and the end point is in normal. But this kind of begs the question of normality, and it might be that also medicine is in need of some adjustment of terms, and I'm not sure what to think about the normal discussion and so on. But at least that's a remark. But what I think to be the significant point here, and you can disagree, but I think that a very important characteristic of medicine and what makes medicine the medicine is the diagnostic pathway, and the fact that medicine is an empirical science. That it does, the theory is built on hypothesis, observation, clinical studies, process is very long. But then again, I'm not sure whether we can say the same thing with the enhancement discussion, because at least I don't see very much of diagnosis being made in the enhancement discussion, which kind of takes the solution to be enhancement and then suggesting several kinds of traits and characteristics and worldwide problems to be a question to which the enhancement technology would be the answer. So I know that I'm painting kind of with a big brush here, but I think there's a point there that medicine is based on diagnosis and diagnostic pathways, and enhancement is not. So I'm wondering whether, based on this observation, I'm not sure whether enhancement project kind of deserves to be in the ethical framework of medical ethics. And I'm kind of suggesting that, based on these observations, the enhancement project is a remedy without the diagnosis. And if we think about medicine and what's good medicine and bad medicine, the kind of medicine and the medical discussion that gets a lot of critique to itself is a medicine that is reductionist or is focusing excessively only on biomedical solutions. We have a lot of discussion about medicalization, hopeful principles, meaning the opposite of precautionary principle. The hopeful principle states that whatever we hope to be becoming true will happen, so it's the opposite, and faces the same empirical challenges as the precautionary principle. But with that list, if a medical literature would entail excessive reductionism and the hopeful principles, we'd say that it's bad medicine, won't be. And we criticize that medical literature about being a bad medicine. So what I'm kind of suggesting is that, or I'm asking, is that is the enhancement project, is it kind of blamed to be just bad medicine? And if that's true, I'm kind of suggesting that the enhancement discussion would have three alternatives. The first one would be to step away from the bad medicine and stop being reductionist and excessively focusing on biomedical solutions and so on, and start taking account really the complexity and dynamicity of phenomena and so on, and kind of get real and really starting to think in a more holistic way that if we really could do some enhancements, what could they really be, and what would it really be, and kind of make the diagnostic process of whatever characteristics you wish to enhance or so on. Or if it doesn't do so, if the enhancement project kind of sticks with the reductionist view, I'm afraid that it's just going to be another dimension of medicalization. And I heard this year in another conference that we should kind of get rid of the whole term of medicalization because it refers to medicine, and medicalization has actually very little to do with medicine. So medicalization should be called health politics. And if it's not, and the enhancement project sticks with reductionism, maybe we should, get rid of the word enhancement or biomedical enhancement and start calling it improvement politics, something like that, if it's so political. Or the third alternative would be to really explicitly start to call itself a thought experiment, which is a very relevant option because thought experiments related to enhancement really do have philosophical value, and it's very important to think about those things. But then it should be more explicitly a thought experiment. Okay, that's 15 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. And I know that it changed slightly on understanding enhancement is actually in your option analysis on disciplinary fields framework. So, the final speaker is Rosa Rantanen, who has affiliation with the CSD as well, and the University of Turku. But this paper is what is enhanced when human life is extended and ethical.
Thank you very much. So yes, I'm finishing my PhD at the University of Turku in the philosophy department about the ethics of considerable life extension. But I'm also the coordinator of international cooperation of this center for the study of bioethics. So I might have emailed most of you, and hello to all those I didn't read yet. I'm not an enhancement expert. I've been, like I said, my thesis is about life extension, considerable life extension. Of course, it's related, but I'm a little bit puzzled about how it's actually related to this discussion, how it should be, and I'm going to tell you why. So this is an outline of what I'm going to do, just explaining what I mean by life extension, what is the relationship between life extension and enhancement, a very short view, and how to define life in this context that I'm using today, and just to come back at the end to the question why or how and what are we enhancing when we are extending life, or are we enhancing anything? Sorry for the green picture. I think I prefer using these kind of pictures instead of DNA and molecules because I think it's closer to the truth that we are seeing right now. And just a disclaimer, I'm not for or against, so don't there's not a message like that in this presentation. What I mean by life extension in this presentation is the extending human life by various medical means, but also non-medical means. By considerable life extension, that you might also call radical life extension, or what I would prefer. I mean extending human life to price considerably, and by means of more of new and emerging technologies of bioediting and so on. And this is the disclaimer that I just said that, or in a way, in this presentation, I'm not taking out of sense whether life extension is ethically desirable. I'm not giving arguments for that. I'm assuming it's not very undesirable per se, although there's a lot of severe ethical questions about this that I'm very familiar with. Just to make a kind of a practical distinguish between a couple of concepts. So when you talk about life extension, you have to define what is life. Okay, you can define it from various points of view, from metaphysical point of view, from cultural point of view, from biological point of view, and this is one of those more biological, practical views of how to talk about life extension. So life expectancy can be separated from lifespan. It's not the only way to separate between these concepts or concepts related to life extension, but this is one way that I find useful. So life expectancy refers to the life expectancy, the amount of years you can be expected to live when you are born or at a certain age. It's highly affected by social and political factors and environment, and it can be extended very much without any kind of so-called high-tech solutions or new biomedical technologies. So for example, perhaps the main reason for the extension or increase in life expectancy globally has been the reduced under 5 mortality, which is to say the mortality of children under 5 years old. So that has nothing to do with the people working in the lab and trying to beat the death or something like that, as you can imagine. So I also tend to say there is kind of a false causation in a way that is seen in this discussion sometimes, that because we decrease child mortality and we have some basic health care in the developing or poor areas, the life expectancy has been increasing, and somehow people see this high medical technology as a continuum of this, but as a continuity or something like that, but I think it's kind of a false continuum, that these are in a way two separate things, but you can argue about that. And the current maximum average life expectancy is around 85 years if you think globally. This is average maximum life expectancy, not average. And lifespan is a more species-specific term, so you can think of it as the lifespan of the human species, instead of, for example, Finnish people or Serbian people or so on. It's more biologically determined, and so however long you live with a healthy, mostly healthy body, healthy condition, at some point your body will enter this biological process of senescence, which means that slowly your body starts to change, and at the end your cells start to die, and so eventually you die even though you're not suffering from cancer or Alzheimer's disease and so on. And this is a process that we cannot really affect at the moment. I will never be able to affect it. I don't have the scientific background, but other people are working with it. So extension of lifespan requires a very different technological or medical setup than to increase life expectancy. So the maximum human lifespan has been around 120 years, 125 years, or hundreds or thousands of years. So whereas the life expectancy has been going up, the maximum human lifespan has not increased a lot, which is to also show this difference between the terms. Let's move on to a little bit, just like a different point of view. My argumentation is not based on this article by John K. Davis with the American philosopher, but this is just to show you briefly in a few minutes what this conversation is about, because I have to do a lot of shortening here. So recently he wrote an article called 4 Ways Life Extension Will Change Our Relationship with Death. And what I think is useful is that he separates between 4 groups of people that we can imagine to have when life is extended considerably, or even maybe perhaps nowadays. So the first group is the haves, aka those who have life extension, those who can get life extension and also want to use it. And the other group, the have-nots, it's quite self-explanatory. So it's people who they just cannot get life extension. It's not an option for them to get. The first will-not is not a typo. He has 2 will-nots, I think. I don't know why, but for some reason. The first will-not is a group who can get life extension, but they turn it down, so they don't take the option. And the other will-nots are also a group of people who can get life extension, but they prefer not to have it. And the difference between these 2 will-nots group is that in the second one, the people are more reluctant to maybe live for a very long time for religious or cultural reasons, but they also might feel, for example, that turning out a treatment that might continue, or enhancement that might continue your life would be kind of suicide that is immoral in many religious, in many spheres of religious thinking, for example. And I will not go further into this argumentation. You can make up your own mind how convincing you think it is, but I think it's, as a general to distinguish between different groups of people, it's quite useful. And so you can use this also as a base to think about how differently different groups of people will experience the assumed availability of life extension and technologies, what kind of belief systems different groups of people have what kind of a possibility they have to access this technology. So in that way, this chart brings up a lot of the questions that are present in this discussion. So why am I talking about life extension in here? It's because life extension in a lot of philosophical literature is considered as part of the human enhancement project. So there's a list of evidence in my slide. It's not, it's just to prove that it's true that there exists literature. And you probably already know this because people like Axel Harris, who over here, has written about this in many enhancement books that I read, and also I've seen in different languages. Also, there's more books talking about different enhancements, and life extension or immortality or longevity is often one of them. And what exactly is meant by enhancement, of course, differs. So it's a very big question: what is enhancement? What is life extension? What is life extension as an enhancement? And what is treatment? What is enhancement? So there's a whole lot of questions. And I'm just going to be a little bit critical actually to this, because my focus is especially on life extension when I'm working on considerable life extension. And I don't all the time find it useful that we are talking about it in the sphere of human enhancement. This is not to say, another disclaimer, it's not to say that enhancement is not important, it's not to say the things that are discussed in the literature are not important, but this is more just a comment about how I think we should or could discuss things. So, I'm going to give one answer to this question, because it's kind of a grander question. How to define life? I will just give a definition of life, one definition of life to guide you in what I'm going to argue very briefly now. So, the base is on Thomas Nagel's idea that death is that because it deprives us of life itself. So this is one form of so-called deprivation view that has been presented in this literature of philosophy of death for thousands of years. There's different formulations of this view. So the typical formulation of this deprivation view would be that life deprives of something good, the good things in life. So this is my interpretation of this Nagel's argumentation. This is also arguable, but the way I see it, he thinks that that is bad because it deprives us of life itself. And what on earth is this life itself? Well, to me, it just refers to the basic capacity of being alive, of existing, but it's not merely existing, for example, in a coma, or maybe even a coma in a persistent vegetative state where you cannot have any experience, but you have to have the capacity to experience subjective experiences, but it does not refer to any particular experience. So I'm more referring to the capacity than to any certain experience, for example, pleasure or pain, but just to have the capacity to be a person, a being, a human, or another kind of being who can experience that. So from this point of view, that is the end of this capacity, is the end of subjective experience. Of course, then there's other definitions of death and how to tell that someone dies completely and so on. So my question is, if death is the end of the capacity of having subjective experience and being alive, then how can we, it seems that we either have this capacity or we don't. You can argue a little bit from the medical point of view that there's different stages of dying, but I'm not really talking now biologically. From this point of view, you are dead if you're, for example, you're brain dead and you're not having the experience and so on. So if it's something we either have or not, how can we enhance it? How can we enhance the degree of it? This is my question. To explain what I'm saying is, you can compare it to, for example, if you want to, this is a very good example, but if you want to enhance intelligence, you can increase IQ somehow, improve logical thinking. You can do this by education, you can do this by biomedicine, different means. You want to enhance cognitive skills, you can improve concentration, take medication to concentrate, improve your study skills, and so on. If you want longevity, you extend your life. But how do you do that, and what does it mean if you think of life as this kind of capacity for example, or kind of capacity comparable to these other ones. So what does it mean? I feel like I'm almost like a child who after every answer asks again, like, but what does that mean? But I guess that's what philosophers do. So what does not mean is it doesn't mean that we should just live on. Even the most serious supporters of life extension don't say that. So what they want is a long and healthy, good or meaningful life, whatever that may mean. Not just a life where you merely exist. So what we want is a life with good quality and not mere existence. Even though there's a lot of criticism that what about the quality of life? The quality of life is included in this discussion. It's also, you can see it in practical studies. Here life expectancy is 71 years old globally, according to WHO. But the healthy life expectancy is only 62 years old, and it's not growing as fast as the life expectancy in general. And for example, in the global burden of disease study, it has been brought up that maybe better measurements for measuring well-being in societies would be healthy life expectancy instead of life expectancy. So it also points to the fact that we appreciate the healthiness and the quality of life more than just the mere existence and being alive. Of course, it's more than mere existence in the negative kind of sense that we're talking about here, but anyway. So what if what is wanted is more than just being alive, having the capacity, because it seems kind of a very interesting philosophical, kind of an empty concept. But that's not what we want. It's not what we want, then what is actually enhanced? Possible answer to that is the aim is to enhance well-being and not only a certain capacity. To me this seems reasonable, but my question then is why or how do we need to talk about life extension in the context of human enhancement? Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was actually a wonderful group of vectors, 4 very different vectors with some overlaps, but it was really very, very broad scope of things that were covered. Now, with the 4 speakers up, nice well, make yourself comfortable up here. Now, we'll just slip a little bit into break time, just by about 5 minutes, but that's just to let the other people get to the queue first anyway, so you'll save them queuing time at the end. Now, the main thing is that at the end of 4 main questions, just to make sure that each 4 speaker has been included. Now, that could be via group questions as well. That's no problem. And if somebody has a follow-up that's burning a hole in their pants, use the finger rule. Okay, so main question, but if you have a follow-up, just point the finger. Make sure it is a follow-up, I'll break it down fingers off. So, who has an initial question?
Yeah, thank you all 4 of you for your talk. My question initially goes to Joanna. Actually, it's 3 points I'd like to ask you. First of all, you said about the medical ethics frame for medicine that medicine is different from enhancement because in medicine you have this diagnosis and enhancement doesn't work with diagnosis. But first of all, I think the term diagnosis refers directly back to some notion of disease or illness, which you yourself pointed out is a difficult notion. So I wondered about that. And another issue is, I think, actually in the enhancement debate, specifically in the moral enhancement debate, actually there is a kind of diagnosis, although I don't really agree with it, but the diagnosis is that our capacities lag behind the issues that we face, and that is the reason for all kinds of global problems and terrible things that are going to happen. So there is a kind of diagnosis for which enhancement is said to be a solution. So I was wondering, could you comment on that?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. That's a great remark, and surely there's some kind of diagnosis. If you count that to be a diagnosis, to say that there's something in the wrong in the world and we must do something about it. But I wouldn't compare that to the medical kind of diagnosis. If we compare, we have to, for example, one suggestion has been, for example, xenophobia, and to morally enhance people not to be like that anymore. So, what would be the medical diagnostic pathway to xenophobia? Well, I'm not a doctor, so, but like, surely the diagnostic pathway would not be to say that let's feed people some oxytocin or let's manipulate one gene for xenophobia or something like that. And where's the observation? Where's the experiment? Where's the kind of wider view on the original problem? That's my question. I don't think that a similar kind of diagnosis takes place.
Can you just say, so let's go because I'm talking about more myopia, right? So the short sightedness, well, it is in medical diagnosis.
Yeah.
Okay, so time as well as many of the other speakers have something related to that particular point, so feel free to share that.
This is kind of follow-up, but I was just wondering about the difference between treatment and enhancement. And it seems to me that there are three cases where something is treatment, something is enhancement, but they are in the middle. There seems to be very low borderline. Let me give one or two examples. Suppose there's a way to lower the one's chance, a man's chance to have, let's say, prostate cancer, or alternatively to lower one's blood pressure. I mean, is that enhancement or is that?
Sorry, lower what?
Blood pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, let's say hypertension blood pressure, to lower it by 10% or whatever. And is that enhancement of treatment? I mean, it's not, it could be either.
Yeah, it could be, but my point is that that's exactly what we could start to do. Like, take one specific thing, really consider what the reasons are for that phenomenon, really make a diagnosis for it, and then if we find that there's some biomedical means to intervene for that, then like, yay, great for everyone. But instead of saying that let's have enhancement for what your examples were, but I'm speaking especially on the morality, empathy, fairness, altruism, xenophobia, halting climate change, having a sunny temperament, those kinds of things. Of course, there's some very clear, for example, blood pressure. Of course, it belongs to this sphere where diagnostics is being made. But yeah.
But suppose one blood pressure is normal. I mean, within the normal range. Mm-hmm. But of course, if you get lower, then one gets a bit longer. Then it's not clear that there's a treatment, right? I mean, suppose my blood pressure is normal, but at this age, the blood pressure goes up. Yeah. So even for a normal guy, you could get disease from having, high blood pressure.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that this could be a point to continue on. So a break for a moment.
Okay.
I have a question that's like trying to link the two parts of you on somehow virtue, living on virtue ethics, or the idea of virtue and the idea of prolongation of life. And the question for me would be, is there, if you talk about life extension in the sense of enhancement, don't we necessarily have to talk about quality of life as well, in the sense of, does it make sense just to talk about the quantitative measurements of how long does somebody live in the sense of Guinness Book of Records? In 20 years from now, if you have some kind of new people will exceed the extension. And the question is like, isn't it important that in the moment we talk about life extension, we have really to think about what is a good life, what is what is wise aging, and so on. So don't we have to go back to values and virtues?
Yes, and I totally agree, and I don't know how well I presented my things, but I should be very well aligned with what I said. I think there's some like specific bioethical or like societal questions related to life extension, but that doesn't take away the fact that there's a lot of like really basic value questions and questions of quality of life. What I'm especially trying to say in this talk is that I think it's highly important to think what is a good life, how can we reach it, how can we lead a good life, but it's not necessary to talk about this in the sphere of enhancement. I think that enhancement, I don't want to get from my rotten tomatoes or something now, but I think the concept of enhancement in a way sometimes is like a philosophical baggage, at least to me, when I'm talking about this issue. So when I'm trying to address a certain issue which already is vague as such, then it is becoming like a baggage of defining what's treatment, what is medical ethics, what is enhancement, and how do we define enhancement, and who says what. And actually, I don't need that. So that's why I try to kind of get rid of that. And this, again, is not to say that it's not important, the things that you talk about in the sphere of enhancement. It's just saying, I'm also talking about the framework now. So I think it's totally the right solution to think more on this, how can we use this life. For example, I like to say we have a very long life expectancy. For example, in Finland, maybe for me like 82 years, but a lot of people don't live to 82 because they make other kind of bad choices. So for people to live a better life, it's not necessarily going to make any difference if you have the chance to live until 100, you're going to screw up anyway. Or if you don't know how to find meaning in your life. Yeah. And you have an
answer? Maybe I would add that obviously when we consider virtues can be developed to live more intensely our lives. It is also something that can change our perception of our old age. We're talking about life expectancy and health. I think that virtues can change also our perceiving weaknesses, health problems.
Okay. I have 3 fingers that went up there. A hand, and 3 fingers. So 3 fingers. Okay.
Thank you. I have a short question to Johanna. Do you think that medical framework is value neutral? Because in my opinion, it is very strongly value laden as well. Because, for example, the very basic notions we have in medicine, health, pathology, normality, of course, all of them refer to some have data, to some physiological findings, but there are also social structure reflection as well. Okay, I think that all this mentioned just now reflect very strongly some social notion of normality, of normal humanity works.
Yeah, surely. I didn't mean to say that I think medical ethics is value neutral, but I kind of neutral or positive. Neutral in the sense that when we say that I'm going to the doctor, I'm taking my medicine, and so on. So speak about it is neutral or positive, but kind of more rarely negative. So that's perhaps I should have put my words better on. But thanks, you're absolutely right.
I think the finger moved up pretty slightly there. But just before the other,
What we read the role view personal or individual history. Especially when we see that becoming old is not only regressive process of code, organism or code what human being needs or really is. Becoming old means life experience, wisdom, etc.
Yes, I'm not sure if that's a question, or I mean, yes, I also agree with that, of course, and then it's not, the problem for me is not that you cannot put this value and quality in the life extension. I'm not a big, I don't want to have an agenda that I'm pushing for it, that's already very long. I'm not sure if it's my intuition that it's necessarily right or necessary, but I also don't find convincing reasons maybe to say no. But you're absolutely right, but I think the fact that if you want to live 100 years older doesn't take away the fact that you can get also, you can still appreciate old age and you can still appreciate life experience. And then you have, also you can make distinction between aging and getting older, so everything gets older, but certain biological organisms age, and that depends also how you're talking about aging. So when I was talking about life expectancy and also this sentence, it's very biological concept of aging. But then of course there's a lot of cultural issues and valuing of age.
There's just 3 questions that hands went up. I'm just going to do 1, 2, 3. Okay.
Peter, I wanted just to ask if you would please say more about what you meant when you said that virtue ethics fits with moral psychology. To keep it as simple as
well, there are different kinds of virtue ethics, but taking Aquinas' elaboration of virtue ethics, he analyzes many things that are, we could say, right behind our moral choices. Let's say our emotional life, our biological drives, our life considered biological. So the fact that we have some desires, quite naturally, biologically, is to be considered also in virtue ethics. It helps to describe our choices, our tendencies in a more, say, adequate way. But today there are also studies that show how our moral choices happen in the real world. So it is less probable that our choices happen according to mathematical formulas. It is more probable that we just function like it is described within the framework of virtue ethics. Or also, when we consider the ontological approaches, the emphasis on rational choice, rationality seems to be exaggerated. It has to be balanced with our emotional life and natural tendencies that we have.
Okay, we have time for probably one more. If it's on moral enhancement, it's a topic that hasn't been mentioned.
It was a follow-up to 4 questions ago, but it's a combined question for 2 speakers. Yes, one question for 2.
If it's a group question.
Yes, quickly. Okay, group question. especially for the last two speakers, so Rosa and Johan.
That's cheating now.
Does it seem that it seems like the projects are very similar in the sense that so Johanna, if I understand you correctly, you're suggesting that maybe enhancement isn't the way to talk about this, and Rosa's saying similar. It's just like wait, I don't really want to talk about enhancement. Let's talk about other stuff. Do you see your projects as similar in that vein? And if not, could you speak to the differences, to the nuances? Because Johanna, you didn't really say which one of the options you would prefer. So I'd like to hear something about that as well in that context.
Okay, we'll pause. That can be done during the break. Just sorry, it's just that we're so far over time. Okay, well, we're 8 minutes past 5 now, so probably Gwen is just right. So